It's December 1933. A young couple hails a taxicab late at night at the Hudson River Pier in New York. The driver of the cab notices that the couple is visibly agitated, and they've been arguing. And as he listens in, he starts to put the pieces together. The woman is demanding to know why their honeymoon trip abroad was cancelled. The man's reasoning, it turned out, was simple logistics. She couldn't travel with him formally as his wife, despite the fact they were newly married. The shocking truth was, he was already married to someone else. The bickering became more and more heated until the cabbie finally dropped the pair off at their apartment on East 22nd Street. 2 days later, the man was seen again boarding the RMS Olympic, bound for Southampton, alone, with a hefty amount of luggage in tow, including one exceptionally large steamer trunk belonging to his new wife. He boarded the liner, never left his cabin for the duration of the voyage, and according to stewards, he completed the crossing without incident, but his new wife, mysteriously, was never seen again. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your friend Mike Brady from Oceanliner Designs, and this is the story of the bizarre disappearance of Agnes Tufverson, an almost 100-year-old cold case which combines a transatlantic love triangle, a suspected murder, and one fateful crossing aboard the RMS Olympic. Ivan Poderjay was born in 1899 in Austria-Hungary, what would eventually become Czechoslovakia, and while not much is known about his life prior to meeting Tufverson, he was, if nothing else, known for being a ladies' man. Described by the New York Times as an extremely handsome 35-year-old, he was said to have been quite successful with women, reportedly having a string of affairs and even several fiancées strewn throughout Europe. Tufverson, on the other hand, was a socialite and a lawyer living in Detroit, successful in her career but reportedly unlucky in love. It might have seemed to her that fate had finally intervened when she met Poderjay during the summer of 1933 on a boat train in England, and relieved as she may have been to finally find someone worthy of marriage, clearly all was not as it appeared to be from the outside looking in. The two had reportedly struck up a romance when Tufverson had confided in Poderjay that she was despondent thanks to a failed love affair. According to Poderjay, she'd been so distraught that she claimed she'd rather die than return to America unwed. Feeling sympathy for her predicament, he said, Poderjay became a close confidant of Tufverson, and within a few months the two were engaged to be married. While this whirlwind romance had kept Agnes swept off her feet throughout the autumn months, by the time December rolled around, the marriage license had been signed, things started to become a bit more troubled. The pair had settled on a honeymoon trip throughout Europe aboard the liner Hamburg of the Hamburg America line 2 weeks after their wedding day. But the mood quickly shifted from excitement to aggravation when, upon arriving at the Hudson River Pier to actually embark on the trip, it came to light that Poderjay had never booked it at all. It was reported that Poderjay refused to list Tufverson as his wife on the passenger list since he was secretly already married, and the tickets were never issued. It's questionable if Poderjay ever actually intended to buy tickets to begin with. A bit of quarrel erupted between the two in the taxicab all the way home from the pier, and their arrival back at Tufverson's apartment that night would be the last time she was ever publicly seen. Her bank account was later emptied, and Poderjay booked a new trip into Southampton aboard the Olympic just 2 days later, this time fully intending to board the ship, equipped with 200 razor blades, a bottle of sedatives, and a steamer trunk that investigators later claimed was large enough to easily fit a body. Agnes Tufverson was reported missing by her 3 younger sisters in May 1934, after having seen head nor tail of Agnes, and she planned to leave for a honeymoon with Poderjay back in December, save for a single telegram supposedly sent to them by her on January 2nd stating that she was, quote, sailing for India by way of France, though it was unclear whether this telegram was ever actually sent from Agnes at all. Her sisters were convinced Poderjay was to blame. The charming playboy had utterly bewitched their beloved Agnes, and she'd fallen head over heels for him, swept up as she was in her new fairy tale romance. They insisted that Agnes was not the type to simply up and vanish for months without a trace. They also refuted the claims made up by Poderjay that their sister was hopelessly depressed, instead claiming that their sister was the one member of our family always in a cheerful mood. She had everything to live for, until she met Poderjay. She never paid any attention to men. She was so tied up in her work and her love of travel. The only reasonable explanation for her disappearance the sisters said, centered on Poderjay. When investigators located Poderjay in Vienna and detained him for questioning, what they found was nothing short of unsettling. It quickly came to light that Poderjay had married Marguerite Suzanne Ferrand in March 1933, just 4 months prior to his first meeting with Agnes Tufverson, and just 9 months after marrying Ferrand, he had married Tufverson. Despite all this, Poderjay had been listed as single on his passport. The whole thing smacked of shady business, and it was illegal to boot. On June 12, 1934, Poderjay was arrested on charges of bigamy, the act of having more than one spouse simultaneously, and quickly became the main person of interest in the disappearance of his second wife. During questioning, he claimed that Agnes had known that he was already married to another woman and had insisted they go through with the ceremony anyway, and had later told him, after their aborted trip on the Hamburg, that she was to head out on a world tour alone, starting in Montreal, with plans to later reunite with him in London. He said that she emptied her bank account and said that if he didn't hear from her in 1 month, she was probably dead. Agnes's sister, Sally, dismissed this as nonsense, pointing out that Agnes had left her only fur coat behind with Poderjay, and she would have never done so knowing about the freezing temperatures in Canada at that time of year. Another of the Tufverson sisters, Selma, noted that among the possessions that Tufverson had left behind at Poderjay's apartment was a briefcase, which she insisted Agnes would never travel without if she were alive. She claimed that, quote, it was a symbol of Agnes' success and it meant everything to her. The sisters also agreed that the sudden disappearance was quite out of character for Agnes, who wasn't one for impulsive decisions. Somewhere between the couple's quarrel at the pier and Poderjay boarding the Olympic 2 days later, something had clearly gone very wrong. Poderjay's crossing aboard Olympic quickly became central to investigators' efforts. He had boarded the ship with Tufverson's luggage and many of her belongings 2 days after her last known appearance, as well as one particularly large trunk, which became the focal point. Having mysteriously gone missing after the voyage, an international scavenger hunt for the trunk and its contents soon made headlines. Police theorised that Agnes Tufverson may have been stowed in the trunk, either alive or dead, and during the voyage she may have been unceremoniously tossed out of the stateroom's portholes. When combined with the fact that Poderjay had boarded the ship in possession of a bottle of sedatives and a large quantity of brand new razor blades, the morbid theory of murder on the high seas and disposal of a body was enough to capture the attention of the press on both sides of the Atlantic, and it became the favoured theory in the case of Tufverson's disappearance. And it wasn't just the press latching onto public sensationalism either. The theory led investigators to the stateroom that Poderjay had occupied in Olympic, room C86, in tourist class. An extensive search of the stateroom was held by authorities, who swept the room top to bottom looking for any signs of foul play, including traces of blood, hair, or skin. The porthole in question was inspected with a microscope. The carpet had chemicals applied to it to check for the presence of blood or any other biological material. When asked if a body could feasibly be squeezed through the cabin's porthole, Lieutenant William J. McMahon, head of the research squad in charge of the investigation, said, "I could jump through it. It would be easy to put a body through it." But investigators' hopes that the stateroom search would lead to a break in the case were dashed when it became clear that in the time elapsed from Poderjay's crossing to the investigation, December to June, the cabin had been thoroughly cleaned many times. Any traces that the stateroom may have been a crime scene had long since been washed away. Any clues that were once left behind aboard Olympic were long gone, thanks in large part to Cunard White Starline's dedication to unmatched cleanliness. Every inch of woodwork had been scrubbed, every carpet of fibre was washed, all the glass scoured, and all the metal freshly polished. You almost couldn't ask for a better crime scene cleanup crew. When interviewed by authorities about Poderjay's behaviour during his December crossing, stewards were quick to paint him as a perfectly upstanding passenger. They claimed that nothing seemed unusual about Poderjay's behaviour, though he had refused to leave his stateroom during the entirety of the voyage, and that he'd opened the large trunk in front of them, and all contents had seemed perfectly normal, except that they'd examined it the morning after the ship had set sail, leaving Poderjay the entire evening alone with the trunk and its contents. The stewards went as far as to describe Poderjay as friendly and forthcoming, especially when it came to chatting with them all about his less than conventional marital status. Steward Ernest Churcher recalled, "He spoke to me quite freely of his wife in Czechoslovakia and his other wife in London. He occasionally spoke of a very great friend he had in New York, and always spoke as if he would be going back to her just as he was returning to his wife in London and his wife on the continent." The statement about his wives did raise eyebrows, since, while it was well known that Poderjay had taken a wife on each side of the Atlantic, no mention of a third wife had been made up until that point. According to the steward, Poderjay's explanation for how this arrangement was viable was that his marriage to the Czech woman was not legally binding in London, and his marriage to Mrs. Ferron was not legally binding in Czechoslovakia, so the two could peacefully coexist. Tufverson, while Poderjay had never referred to her by name according to the steward, had only been identified as his very good friend, meaning he likely knew full well his marriage to Agnes was anything but legal and should be kept quiet. It was never made clear who exactly this Czech woman was, though a Belgrade woman by the name of Madame Zivka did come forward later, producing documents proving her marriage to Poderjay from October 1926 until their divorce in November 1933, the month before he married Agnes Tufverson, while he was still married to Marguerite Ferron. In June 1934, just a month after her husband's arrest and the same month Olympic was scoured for clues, Marguerite Ferron, Poderjay's first wife, was detained in New York when she was found in possession of several trunks filled with Agnes Tufverson's belongings. When questioned, she explained that Agnes had left much of her clothing and other possessions with Poderjay before leaving on her supposed world tour, with plans that he would return them to her once they were reunited in London. Conveniently, Tufverson had also reportedly left the couple with a gift of about $34,200, or around $815,000 in today's money, in British government bonds and Yugoslavian stock. According to Poderjay, his wife had intended that he sell the securities on her behalf in London, but investigators noted it would be highly unlikely that a clever, careful woman like Agnes Tufverson would entrust such a large sum of money with a man she'd only known for a matter of months. Ferron denied knowing anything at all about her husband's new marriage, saying, "Ivan was always weak where women were concerned, and if they were unhappy, he tried to comfort them. He had some business to settle in New York, and that was where our friend Agnes Tufverson lived. She was looking for a husband, and unfortunately, she fell in love with mine." During this interview, it was later discovered that Ferron had been wearing a red dress that once belonged to Agnes Tufverson. Meanwhile, Poderjay himself remained in police custody in Vienna, though with the investigation turning up no major leads, authorities were running out of recourse to keep him detained. The mysterious large trunk brought aboard the Olympic still remained missing. Poderjay's apartment turned up no clues, despite some promising leads, and the stateroom aboard Olympic still yielded nothing at all, save for the knowledge that the cabin's porthole had been wide enough to fit a body, and Poderjay had been left with enough time alone to have retrieved Agnes's body from within the trunk and dispose it through that porthole, before rearranging the contents of the trunk to appear perfectly normal before stewards inspected it the next day. With all the suspicious circumstantial evidence floating about, investigators felt strongly that Poderjay was directly tied to Tufverson's disappearance, even going so far as to pursue a murder charge, but they still lacked anything concrete. There was no body, no weapon, not even any evidence of any violent crime having occurred at all. Police found themselves with nothing that would make any of the charges against Poderjay stick, save for bigamy. On this, Poderjay continually waffled, from insisting that each of his marriages was not legally recognised in that country, therefore making both somehow legal, to denying that he ever married Tufverson at all, instead insisting that she was merely a very good friend. He didn't seem to ever have his story straight. He never wavered on one topic though. He always firmly insisted that Agnes Tufverson was alive, even going as far as to say that if he was released from police custody, he could track her down himself within 60 days. A valiant effort on Poderjay's part, but to his dismay, he remained in custody until he was finally extradited to the US from Vienna to stand trial in January 1935. Despite all the authorities' best efforts, despite no trace of Agnes Tufverson having surfaced for over a year, and a wealth of suspicious activity having taken place in the days prior to and just after her disappearance, Ivan Poderjay's only charge was bigamy. When passing down his sentence, the judge overseeing the trial said, "It's my judgment that this defendant should be before this court on another charge." But the court's hands were tied. Poderjay ultimately served just 5 years in prison, and when he re-emerged at the end of his sentence, less one eye and 8 teeth, thanks to a prison fight, he was deported to Yugoslavia, where he reunited with his wife, Marguerite Ferron. Aboard the liner Washington bound for Yugoslavia, Poderjay spoke to reporters and said, I'm glad to get away from this country. The United States authorities have something to answer for the way they've treated me. It was inhuman, and the newspapers have been most unkind and unfair to me with the scandalous tales they have printed about me and my second wife, Agnes Tufverson. Agnes, of course, was never seen nor heard from again. The general consensus is that murder at the hands of Poderjay was the most likely explanation, with her body having been brought on board in the large trunk and then disposed of through a porthole late at night while Olympic was well out to sea. Poderjay and Ferron both stood to make a tidy financial profit from the ordeal, with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Tufverson's government securities and bonds in hand, and by painting Tufverson as erratic, emotionally unstable and self-destructive, Poderjay may have hoped that investigators would be content with the theory she either died or ran away to start a new life abroad. The Tufverson sisters never bought it. One, Sally, was quoted in the New York Times as saying, "I think my sister lies at the bottom of the Atlantic. I think she was drugged and doped and thrown out of that porthole." We may never know the full story behind the disappearance of Agnes Tufverson. Had her disappearance been reported sooner, it's possible that authorities may have come across more compelling evidence to use against Poderjay in court. Perhaps the break in the case could have been found in the missing trunk, which, just like Agnes herself, was strangely never seen again. Or maybe the real story is less gruesome, a tale of a woman who'd had enough, heading off on a solo world tour which ended in her settling down abroad and starting a new life, well away from her strange new husband and his laundry list of partners, although it seems tragically unlikely. Whatever the truth may be, the case remains unsolved, and true crime enthusiasts around the world continue hotly debating the mystery of the disappearance of Agnes Tufverson, even to this day. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your friend Mike Brady from Oceanliner Designs. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel because we get new videos out weekly. If you want to support my work and get really cool perks like behind the scenes and early access, please visit my Patreon in the link in the description below, or sign up as a YouTube member. Come and join the crew. And as always, stay safe, stay happy. And I'll see you again next time.